If aiming feels ridiculously hard when people pick you, but when you pick them, you also end up dying more often than not, your crosshair placement likely sucks. Not to worry though, as this is easily fixable. When it comes to aiming in CS, there are 3 main categories you need to master in order to consistently hit your shots and get more kills. First is counter-strafing, which I've already covered in another video that is linked in the video description. Second is crosshair placement, which we are going over today. And last is proper peeking technique, which I'm going to cover later on this year. In addition, being good at this helps you learn these concepts faster, but doesn't inherently make you a good aimer in CS2 from the get-go. The golden rule when it comes to fixing your crosshair placement is to consciously make sure that the distance between your crosshair and an opponent is always minimal, whether you're peeking or holding an angle, meaning you only have to do small mouse movements or micro adjustments to flick to your target, which is easier and more consistent to pull off than flicking over greater distances, and doesn't require the level of mechanical prowess displayed in the aim trainer clip before. When you make an effort to improve your crosshair placement by applying the following principles, you will be perfectly prepared to click heads more consistently in no time. Literally. First of all, it goes without saying that your crosshair is always supposed to be at head height, since running around like this doesn't do you any favors, as you have to do a disproportionately large flick if you get contact, which is for 1, inconsistent by nature, and for 2, completely unnecessary as well. This classic piece of advice is still sound and pretty much the first concept for the golden rule of minimizing distance. But it is only really helpful when you're neither holding an angle nor actively peeking one. So here's the actual stuff that's more interesting. Crosshair placement when peeking, crosshair placement when holding, and everything in between. In the classical sense, crosshair placement is only really referred to when holding angles, where a lot of advice thrown around is basically place your crosshair as close to the wall as possible and then flick on the peeking opponent, or place your crosshair further away from the wall so an enemy peeks into it and you just need to click. Truth is, neither of those is fully correct, and they are more likely to introduce bad habits to newer players, as both approaches try to teach the right thing, but don't really explain the reason why you should place your crosshair like this. Consider these 2 clips, where I'm placing my crosshair miles away from the wall in one clip, but it's almost glued to the wall in the other one. In both clips I only had to flick my crosshair a rather small distance the moment an opponent appeared on my screen, and my brain processed this information, which is in perfect accordance with the golden rule of crosshair placement. So here's the reasoning behind both clips, which should make it easier for you to understand and replicate these decisions. First, we need to consider the distance from the enemy to the angle they are going to peek you from, as thanks to basic geometry, an enemy peeking close to an angle will move much faster across your screen than someone peeking at a greater distance. The same concept applies to your distance to the angle as well. So, since an average human has a reaction time of around 200 milliseconds, this is where an enemy would end up being when swinging you, and your brain being able to process the visual information and starting to adjust your crosshair. Next, you also need to think about whether an opponent is going to wide swing, silent peek, and for lower elos, also if they might even shift peek or simply shift across an angle. Going back to the examples I showed earlier, let's analyze them with the necessary context. In clip number 1, the enemies got a pick on both of my mid players, so they are likely going to accelerate towards A, meaning they are almost guaranteed to wide swing. Additionally, the way you will then usually clear camera is by swinging either close or midway between camera and the back wall. In short, the relevant information for me in this scenario is A, it's going to be a wide swing, and B, most likely somewhat close to the angle I'm holding, which correctly prompted me to place my crosshair far off the wall. Now, the first opponent actually ended up swinging further back than expected, but since my horizontal distance from the angle was spot on, I just needed to flick downwards a bit and ended up getting an easy kill. In clip number 2, the T's went down to B side with the bomb, but didn't plant yet, meaning they are likely to try and get a pick first onto either me or my teammate, or rotate all the way back to heaven and go A. So if they were to run around wide swinging everything, we would have been able to hear them, meaning I only have to expect a silent peek or a shift peek. But since I'm standing in an off angle, the chances of someone silent peeking it are rather low. Again, the relevant information is A, it's going to be a shift peek, and B, somewhat close to the angle, since even the farthest you could peek it from is kinda close. And again, very little mouse movement and an easy kill. As you can see, crosshair placement is more about game sense than it is about raw mechanics. So to make your life a bit easier, here are some rough guidelines you can apply to speed up your learning process for choosing the right distance. Whenever you hear multiple steps or utilities coming your way, you can expect a wide swing, as people don't need to care anymore whether they reveal their position and just want to take space as fast as possible. If you hear a single step, followed by silence, this most likely means someone messed up a silent peek. If there are no further steps afterwards, this means they are most likely continuing to silent peek. When there are no steps and you're low to mid elo, so I'd say roughly up until Faceit level 8 or about 20k in Premiere, expect a shift peek. On the other hand, if you're higher than that, expect a silent peek. This is also where you need to start considering crouch peeks, as people will start trying to throw off your crosshair placement. And no, crouch peeking is not someone crab walking into an angle, but more on that in my upcoming peeking guide. When it comes to peeking, things are a lot less complex, as you are now the one dictating the pace of your peeks, which simplifies the process from before. In the most basic way possible, peeking itself consists of a straightforward routine combined with you pretending that you have wall hacks. Essentially, what you want to be doing is to pretend like you see your opponents through walls, which is called visualizing. Place your crosshair on the wall where you think their head is, and then finally swing out by only pressing A or D, counter strafe, adjust your crosshair, and then shoot. The most important part is to barely move your mouse, or ideally to not move it at all while peeking, but only after you come to a full stop. So the better your crosshair placement becomes, the less distance you need to correct after counter strafing, and the faster you can kill an opponent. Again, game sense is crucial, as you kinda need to know where common angles are, since you wanna place your crosshair on a wall before peeking for most of them. Fortunately, unlike crosshair placement for holding angles, which mostly comes with experience, the entire basic peeking pipeline can easily be trained by playing so-called pre-fire maps on either Refrag, if you have some money to spare, or alternatively B5E pre-fire maps in the Steam Workshop, which are free to play and are all linked in the description. However, in order to get better, you need to make a conscious effort of playing them correctly. When you spawn, there is a line on the floor showing you where to go. Simply follow it and peek every angle where an enemy could be located at. For every angle you peek, make sure to always follow the same process. Stop before the angle, visualize your opponent, place your crosshair on the wall, swing by only using A and D, counter strafe, adjust your crosshair once you're stationary, and then shoot. There are pretty much only two common mistakes when playing pre-fire maps. First, make sure to always commit to your peeks and reset when you overpeak. This makes sure that you are mindful about your peeks and gives your brain the according negative feedback if you mess up. And second, don't jiggle angles to get information. This is a bad habit that is detrimental and 100% translates to your real gameplay. So again, commit to your peeks and reset if you mess up. Lastly, there is still one missing piece of the puzzle left. What about those times where you are neither actively peeking nor actively holding? Because at some point you kinda need to move forward eventually. So for this, let's take a look at Robs, who is one of the best and cleanest mechanical players in CS2. Notice how he is anticipating a peek from T-Boiler and tracking the angle, with his crosshair being the same distance off the wall as when he would be holding it while being stationary. These moments are also pretty much the only time when it is fine to situationally incorporate W and S into your movements. You just need to be aware that if someone peeks you while you have either W or S pressed, you wanna crouch to reduce your forward or backward velocity, in addition to our usual counter strafes, since diagonal counter strafes or counter strafing by using only W or S is really impractical and most of the pros don't even do it. As soon as he reaches T-Boiler, look at how he's instantly switching over to the peeking technique I explained earlier and only peeks by pressing A and D now. After he has cleared everything, he initially tracks a possible peek from halls while moving up the stairs with W and A. To make matters even more clear, Here's another example where he moves up halls by tracking the angle where he could get peeked from and then transitions into one AD peek to clear the tight corner at the end of it and finally transitions into multiple peeks out of apps. Essentially, whenever you're transitioning between holding or peeking, you should place your crosshair on the angle you were previously holding or peeking and summon